for a bit of background, I actually volunteered in refugee camps in Lesbos and in Calais.
Yes.
In my previous life, I'd visited camps in the DRC, in Lebanon, in where there are Syrian, Palestinian, East African refugees. And so it's been something that's been close to my heart for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, how do you provide safe and stable nations? How do you support people who are really, really at, you know, the sort of low ebb and really facing difficult conflict, sexual violence, etc., and seeking a better life for them and their families. And I've always been proud of the role that the UK has played in that, and I hope we continue to play a leadership role in the world.
So, in a way, what we're going to talk about has been taken over by events, because yesterday I learned that the government, that the Home Secretary has announced that the policy is going to change towards settled, not asylum seekers, but towards settled refugees, which is going to put a slightly different perspective on it. But anyway, maybe we'll start with the first thing that I had suggested, which is from your point of view, because I really tried to focus on integration. From your point of view, what can be done to improve the integration of asylum seekers and also settled refugees?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. So firstly, I think it was a terrible idea that the last government cut funding for, say, English language lessons, which are a lifeline for a lot of newly settled people who are either asylum seekers or who have come through regular migration channels. I think that that's one thing that was really important. I would secondly like to pay tribute to a lot of the churches in our local area in Bournemouth and Poole, who are doing a fantastic job at reaching out to people who are waiting for their asylum decisions or who are newly arrived in the area, and providing so much support, a welcoming place to come, and signposting to the right types of organisations. And I know that BCP Council as well has a special working group on bringing together the different organisations that work together to support refugees and asylum seekers in the area. And so those types of things need continued support to be able to continue the good work they're doing, whether that be English lessons or signposting people to jobs, or providing access to community services that they otherwise don't have access to. You know, I think the final thing in this picture is we have seen for too long that people who've come here and have made an asylum application are waiting just far too long for their decision. And we sometimes get people from some of the asylum hotels in Bournemouth writing to us who have been waiting 2-3+ years for a decision. And those people have got their lives completely in limbo. They aren't able to restart. If they have their asylum claim accepted, then they can get on with their lives, rebuild, be active members of our community, get jobs, pay taxes. Unfortunately, they're just stuck in a holding pattern at the moment. And not only is that bad for the people who are waiting, it also, as we've seen, creates this tension in our communities more broadly about the number of people who are just waiting in asylum hotels.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And yes, in relation to churches, I do some volunteering with Food Bank at the City Gate Church. And this is very much a kind of community, the kind of a segment of the population that we see coming to us. And we see them coming for English lessons with RCN as well. So I know exactly what you mean. Yes. So looking at it from, because I did try to look at the concerns from some other again segments of the population. So do you think that those who demonstrate have got genuine concerns, or is it just prejudices?
I think, like with any protest, there are a mix of views of things that bring people to them. So yes, on one hand, we do see people who have a prejudice, who are trying to to spin division in our communities, in our societies, who are looking for someone to blame for the problems that they're facing or that we see in the country. Equally, there are people who, and I meet them all the time, who are not happy with where their lives are. You know, perhaps they have a daughter who can't get a house locally because it's become too expensive and there aren't any council homes, or they're really struggling with the cost of living and have genuine grievances that they want to air, and want to be part of something that says we need to see some change here. And I think we've gotten ourselves as a nation into a situation where under the last government, net migration was the highest it's ever been. It wasn't sustainable. And we have seen the increase in boats coming over, which is a very visible, even if it is a tiny, tiny proportion of the number of people coming. Yeah. And I think on one hand, it's okay to say we don't want to see people risking their lives on small boats or coming into the country illegally, but we need to provide a system that people trust, because trust is so low in so many of our government systems, whether that be the NHS, the school system, the DWP, and the immigration system. And we are trying to deal with this in two ways. One is to say, we absolutely need to restore trust in this system. We need people to know and believe and feel that it works and it's working for everyone, which is why we've made so many of the reforms we have, from reforms to the visa system, to reforms to the border security laws that we have, to reforms that are designed to speed up the processing of asylum claims, and introduce safe and legal routes for people, because we always will have and always want to have a supportive asylum system in the UK. The last government made it so that people did not trust that system anymore, and therefore the support for that system has waned. On the other side of the equation, we absolutely get that people are worried about their futures, about the cost of living, what the future looks like for their children. And we're trying to address those issues by bringing down the cost of living, bringing down inflation and interest rates. We're trying to bring down energy bills. We're trying to give people the best possible opportunities they can by bringing back Best Start family hubs, by increasing the amount of apprenticeships people can go into, by investing in our schools, investing in the NHS, and also looking at housing for the long term. So building 1.5 million homes over the course of this parliament to make sure we're really tackling those underlying issues that drive people towards a real fear, and allow people to really weaponize immigration as an easy answer to some of the real complex challenges we face as a nation.
Yes, so the idea is really to restore trust. People have got better opportunities, and they're less likely to focus to find scapegoats for their trouble.
Well, and some of this is bearing fruit already. We've seen people waiting for asylum claims to be processed fall dramatically. We have removed a number of people from the country who had no right to be here, whose claims weren't accepted, or who had overstayed visas. We're trying to reform the visa system so that it's much more consistent. We're trying to give young people greater opportunities through the work experience scheme with Europe. So all of these things are coming into place, and we're seeing net migration fall. We're seeing also the cost of living fall. So all of these pieces are kind of starting to bear fruit. And I know people are really anxious for change, and I hope that by the time we get to the end of this parliament, we can really have seen a difference, and some of that trust is restored in the systems that we have.
Absolutely. Okay. And yes, so I was going to say anecdotally, but maybe it's not that anecdotal. How did you feel about seeing people protest in front of the RNLI headquarters? Because it didn't seem to be a good look, really. Yes.
No, and the RNLI and all of their volunteers and staff do an absolutely fantastic job of keeping people safe at sea. That is their number one aim. That is what they all join the RNLI to do. That's what they're legally bound to do under the law of the sea, is to save lives. and they are doing fantastic and incredibly dangerous work. And so it breaks my heart a bit to see people protesting the RNLI, because they are an example of a really incredible civic institution that we have in this country, and they're doing the job that they're meant to be doing.
Yes.
And I think the same, about when I see protests outside of the asylum hotels as well. We're trying to close them because it's not good for the people there, it's not good for their local communities, and it's not good for the taxpayer. But so many of those protests have been hijacked by various patriot groups who, as I said, are just trying to sow division in our community, rather than thinking about how we genuinely solve the challenges that we all have together.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, so as I said, when we started, things, well, we know more now about what the government is actually going to implement. So what do you think of this temporary protection limit? Because it really changes what people who come here as migrants or refugees can expect. How is that going to work out?
Well, I mean, this is part of what making the system fairer is. And I think it's really founded in the reality of the world today. People come to the UK or any other country to claim asylum and seek refugee status because their own home country is too unsafe, or they risk persecution or conflict. We hope that we are building a world where these conflicts don't last forever, that things improve, and that people genuinely are able to go back to their countries should they choose to do so. Now, these often we see as well, people who arrive on who achieve a refugee status, then often move on to other forms of visa because they become employed, or they build a skill, or they go to university here, or they have a family here. And so oftentimes people aren't anyway in refugee status indefinitely for the rest of their lives. They're often moving on to other forms of visa or settled status. So I think this change, on the face of it, I know that there's been criticism of it and concern about it, but I think the practical reality of it is that most people move off those statuses. And secondly, we do hope that people are able to go back to their countries of origin should they wish. We see that with the Ukrainian community. Many will want to stay, but many will also want to go back. But they're here on a refugee status, and it's right that they should have that opportunity to go back should they wish.